Hi, welcome to Life Skills with Louie. I'm Louie, and today we are talking about behavior analysis. If you haven't watched the introduction to behavior analysis, please do that to understand this a little better. And if you haven't watched the introduction to connecting to clear, that's a good idea to understand this section better. Finally, if you haven't watched the introduction to the entire video series, it helps you to get a sense of the forest through the trees and see how all 5 sections of skills work together. So to dive right in and talk about behavioral analysis. So for behavioral analysis, we have the same chart as in Getting to Great. If you haven't looked at the videos in Getting to Great, you will need to understand them in order to fully understand this skill. In Getting to Great, we learned to map our experience. We learned to tease out our experience, to see and be aware of our thoughts, the events that happen to us, the actions that we do, the sensations we experience in the body, and the emotions that we experience in the body. We also learned about resilience factors, which we use this cutesy acronym, ABC Me Please. And in short, we have accumulating positive experiences, having fun, building mastery, which is about the feeling of accomplishment, coping ahead, learning to think ahead, practicing mindfulness, having moments of expansive consciousness, taking care of our physical and mental health care, having balanced and intuitive exercise, avoiding mood-altering substances, getting enough sleep, and having balanced and intuitive eating. So our experience is happening to us all the time, and then we find sometimes we end up doing an ineffective action, and it happens with regularity. So it becomes a behavior that we want to stop. And that's the whole reason for behavioral analysis, is to get to know a behavior in order to stop it. The only thing we have to do with behavioral analysis is add one other step that doesn't exist in this map, which is consequences. We also look at consequences with behavioral analysis because sometimes that's a key factor. So all we're doing with behavioral analysis is taking the time to look at the elements around a certain behavior, to understand them and how they fit together. When you first start doing these, it'll probably be maybe a day later when you're like, oh, geez, I did the behavior I didn't want to. And then it gets closer, and maybe it's an hour afterwards, and it's right afterwards. Eventually, you start to catch it before it even happens. Because you begin, as you do this repetitively, you begin to see certain variables popping up each time. And those are referred to as controlling variables because they seem to really have an effect on making the action happen. So in essence, what we do is we find an action we want to work on, that we want to stop. When the action or behavior happens, we look at the surrounding elements. So we start at the behavior, and we work either forwards or backwards. We might look at the consequences first. What happened right after the behavior? Did you feel a sense of relief, sense of pleasure? Did you receive something from doing the behavior? We might look backwards and see what sorts of other actions was I taking? What events were happening? What thoughts were running through my mind? How was my body feeling? And what sort of emotions was I experiencing? We also look at maybe the 24 hours around the behavior, and we look at those, each element of the ABC Me Please. We just map it out. That's the first step, just like Getting to Great, increasing your awareness. Then you start to think, is there anything I could have done differently that might have had an impact on this behavior? You're looking for what is most likely to have an impact. The responses to all of these sections, the TEASE, and then the ABC Please, are within Getting to Great. And you can try any of those responses the next time this comes around and you start to have the urge come up to do the behavior. In this section, we'll also talk about what one does with consequences and a couple extra skills that you can put in the mix that don't exist in Getting to Great. So there's a simplicity to it. You're just looking at a behavior you do, you're understanding the elements that happen around it, the right around it with the thoughts, events, actions, sensations, and emotions, and then 24 to 48 hours around it with these resilience factors. You're deciding what can you work on. Maybe if you work on a certain resilience factor, that'll make a difference. Or maybe if you learn to restructure a certain way of thinking, that'll make a difference. You try to cope ahead so that you will use that the next time around when the behavior is coming up. So it's very caring in that way. And as always, you listen to your own intuition about what might be the most helpful, with the help, hopefully, of a therapist who is leading you through this and has their own awareness, can bring their own awareness to bear from outside to offer more help. So I'm going to offer, after giving a few examples of extra responses you can give, I'm going to offer a example of using myself as someone doing a behavioral analysis to help this make more sense. And I hope that you're able to really bring this pattern in, talk with your therapist about it, and start to use it to genuinely decrease behaviors because you care and you understand the behaviors. And then there's the possibility to make a shift.